Hey Nate,
Hello.
how you doing?
Hey there.
Oh, how are you?
Good. Hey Gail,
Hey,
how are you doing?
Tucker.
Me
And it's
too.
only Tuesday. Hi.
I'm Miriam. Tucker's a good word. I don't use that very much. I just say pooped.
Pooped. Weary, tired,
Worn out.
worn out. Early in the week to be worn out though, man.
Yeah, life
I
is
think it's
full.
the humidity and the pressure and the darkness is just,
And
but
the
I'm sleeping well,
repeated-
so hey,
That's good.
Yeah.
How are you, Miriam?
I'm good. I like the rain.
I like rain,
To bring up some mushrooms.
not every day. But hey,
Yeah. And Nate, how are you energy-wise?
Doing okay. I took a short nap, so I got an edge.
naps are good.
Naps are good. If everyone took naps, the world would be better. Less cranky people.
It took a long time for me to give myself permission to nap. But I'm learning.
It's a good thing. We will see who else joins us. I'm wondering if Zoe and Graham are going to come or not. I'm not sure. I haven't heard either way. So we shall see. And I haven't heard from Isaac Goldstein, who is
Whoops,
interested in coming. Oh, there's Zoe.
since he's on the agenda.
Yeah. I told him
Sorry.
if he wanted to come, that was fine. But I mean, we just had to figure out our process too. Hey, Zoe.
Has he written to the committee?
No, this was going to be his first
Oh.
show, so to speak. So Zoe, we did a round of how we're doing. How you doing?
I am doing good. I am going on a vacation soon, so that's kind of novel and exciting.
You're a farmer. You can't go to vacation in the summer.
I know it's like, how can I do it? Well, yeah, I'm actually going to camp with some goats, so it's within the contract.
Where are you going?
Yeah, where are you going?
I'm going to Montana.
Wow, big
Are you
sky.
taking your goats with you?
No, I'm gonna be learning how to make cheese with somebody else's goats.
How super fun.
That's cool. Where in Montana?
But you make and sell
Kalispell.
chef now, right?
Yeah. I make a lot of different types of cheese, but I'm learning super rustic methods, like over a campfire. Yeah, it's using all natural materials. So we're making cheese in wooden vats that kind of carry the culture that you need for the
Nice.
cheese, so you don't need to buy culture.
That's cool.
Yeah.
This indigenous?
The person
cheese
who's
won't be
teaching has
indigenous.
learned from people who have been doing it for a really long time in very remote areas
Generations.
all over the world. So yeah.
Very cool.
And is it really like a cheese making camp? Or is it just people getting together and learning about cheese?
What's the
Like
difference?
well, it sounded like camp is like an organized, I don't know, it just seems like bigger as opposed to like a workshop kind of experience.
Yeah, it's only 4 days. So it's more of a workshop experience, I think. Yeah. But
Sounds
we are
cool.
camping.
Very cool.
That is very cool. I agree.
Please give us a report when you get back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope to teach some cheese making classes here, so
Yay.
maybe someone would come.
That's cool. Well, why don't we start? Because I have a feeling Graham might not come, and if he does, he'll just be late. So, I don't know who's taking minutes, so I know it's not going to be, I don't think it should be Zoe, because this is your last meeting. So let me see, unless anybody knows off the top. I wasn't prepared
Might
for
be
that one.
me. I haven't done it for a while.
Okay, let's see. Yes, it is you actually, because Graham took the last ones.
Right, well, I'm on. Let's do it.
Cool, great, love it. So I'll call us to order at 7:04. So I don't see any public comment, so that makes that easy. And I don't see Isaac, so I'm sort of assuming he might not be coming. But if he does, we can sort of give him a little bit of floor time just to tell us why he's interested. But Nate, you talked to him a bunch at town meeting, right?
Yeah, at town meeting for sure. And then I reached out to him to make sure that he was aware of, because he was so interested in aggregation, just that he had the link to the web pages that really address that, right? So, beyond just the fact sheet that was available at town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we hadn't spoken a lot, but yeah, we did talk about aggregation, about which he was super enthusiastic. So
Cool.
yeah.
So I think generally speaking, since we're losing wonderful members, we want to gain wonderful members. So we got to figure out what our process is for recommending new members to the select board. So we'll have 3 slots.
Who's stepping down?
Well, Leslie is already gone, and Zoe, then Graham.
Oh, yeah.
Why
So,
would this be any different from the usual?
well, it's mostly, well, there isn't any real usual on committees, so like, I mean, sometimes there's people in the wings who have been coming and people, on the committee say, do you want to be part of it? Because they're regulars. Like, and Concom, for example, is also appointed, and at least they used to have a process where you had to come to at least one meeting in advance to get a sense of how the meeting went.
Oh, 3 or 4.
3 or 4. So you know what you're getting into. I know like the planning board's elected, but the associate members were, I'm remiss, but we agreed to send out a town announce, basically letting people know that there's an associate member opening. And then we were going to have people write in, which is what we did for the last round of associate members. So like there's different processes. I mean, I was thinking we definitely want to do a town announce or let people know. But then beyond that, we could talk about, do we want to have them write something, and then we could, all review it, and then they can come to the meeting. We talk to them. We could have it on a rolling basis, since we might not get anybody, or, we can sort of put a deadline preferred and then see, if we have 6 people, that's fine. There's variations on the theme. So I guess it's what you all think might work best. And Zoe, you should feel free to chime in, since, you've got a sense of what we do. So even though you won't be part of it. Gail.
Zoe, why did you sign up in the first place? That might be instructive. And what did you find once you got here?
Yeah, I signed up because I wanted to learn more about how resources come in and are used. Like, what are the things that we need to think about in terms of resources on a town scale? And how decisions get made within town. And as a way to connect with people in my community that I feel like are aligned ethically with values that I have. And then being on the committee, I did learn a lot. I felt that I didn't quite know how to engage. And I think partly it was, I didn't feel like I had enough time to really, I would have to do a lot of like educating myself to have engaged on a deeper level. And I realized I didn't have that time in my life. And so, yeah, that's, those were my goals going in. And that was kind of my experience being on the committee. And yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Nate, how about you? Because this is your first committee stint too, right?
Yeah, like anywhere. No, not just Shutesbury. I've never been involved in, any kind of committee work before. And yeah, I agree with Zoe, like part of it was like, seeing the committee as a opportunity to learn a ton. And, that's definitely been, my experience. It's challenging because, climate's energy and climate are areas where, there's a lot of technical, scientific knowledge, and then you're bringing an ethical lens to that. And I don't have any formal training in the science of climate or in grid load capacity, or like some of the things that come up as topics. And it's true, like you have to, I think, put that time in. And but compared to the school committee, it might be less time than the school committee.
Guaranteed.
It's
Really?
less time than what Miriam does, probably, almost certainly, right?
Oh,
So,
only if it's not more than 20 hours a week, which is what I put in every week about.
a lot. So yeah, but it's. I mean, I want to keep at it for sure. Yeah.
And I
I have
think,
a few like ideas, and the committee work is like a vehicle for bringing an idea, sharing with others, and maybe it's not a good idea, and you learn that. But yeah, it's been a good experience for me so far.
On-job training.
On-job training.
so Gail, having heard this, it seems like there's a process and then there's the substance part. Like there's how we put out the word and how we want to attract people, but then it's also what we're saying. Like it's, this was our inaugural year. So we want to, if we're going to tell people, like, if you're interested, we want to make sure that the match of what we're saying the committee is about, like we're not going to change the world because we're sort of plodding along in this limited way. But just sort of, we hopefully can change a little part of our world. But it does take time and it does take work. So, having people willing to roll up their sleeves and who care about the issues, like Zoe was saying, sort of that are, that we're sort of all rowing in the same direction, even if we have different particular interests.
Right.
So, I think it's part of the write-up. My sense is people can have backgrounds in this stuff, but they don't have to.
Right.
And the backgrounds can definitely vary because we're all bringing different perspectives to this anyway. So Gail,
I would suggest that we do as you started out, send out a town announcement. We have X numbers of places, vacancies to be filled. You can see the charge to the committee on the website.
mhm,
You can bring your own particular interest and does not require expertise. Come to a few meetings, see how it operates. The committee is in the process of figuring out priorities of those items in the charge. Some of that is temporal, some of it is philosophic, but we do have a long list of things we could get involved with. Timing of what we decide today will vary according to the season, to the charge, to members' interests of pursuing it. But come to a couple of meetings and you may set a number or not. And at a meeting, at least this is how it's gone at other meetings I've been part of. Come to the meeting, see how it goes. Are you really interested or not? And if you're interested, or see a place on the committee where your interest or expertise or wanting to know more would fit in, ask the committee to recommend you're being appointed to the select board.
okay, and so in terms of, I'm good with that, I just want to clarify a couple of things. So it sounds like we have an expectation that people should come to at least one meeting to check it out before they sort of make their
Yes.
request. And then, I mean, we could subsequent to that, just say someone comes, they have a good feel of it and they want to do it, that maybe they write up a paragraph and send it to us so we can, and then they come back and we have a conversation or
And
something like
introduce
that.
themselves, right? And it could be that, they would want to ask questions of members of the committee about things that don't necessarily happen at the meeting which they attend.
Mhm.
Fair enough.
I think it sounds good. I mean, does anyone have any additions?
I think
didn't do it.
at least one meeting is fine.
At least one, yeah.
At least
Mhm.
one. Because it'll end up being more than one by the time the person gets appointed anyway, probably.
Right,
But I would say that, yeah, when we say 2 meetings and at the first meeting, they introduce themselves to us and then give us a write-up and then
well, the first meeting, I think they should just come, so that, I don't think, it sounds like,
just
yeah,
come and
like-
observe.
yeah, like, I mean, it's only if they're interested, should they send us something? Let's not give them a homework assignment before they know they like us.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they can check out minutes of previous meetings on the website. So for instance, in the web committee, we're trying to get new members. And one person evinced an interest and I explained blah, 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 this is what we do. Checked out the prior meeting and says, oh, I don't have the expertise for that. Well, that is one meeting and it was one particular topic. So not to limit it to that. So if a conversation comes up, for instance, on our meeting about bandwidth or whatever, if you don't know anything about bandwidth and, oh, gee, I could. No, I mean, it's broader than that. So this is where, Miriam, I think you're right, more than one attendance at more than one meeting will give you
Yeah.
a broader view of.
I was thinking
the
they come to a
committee's all
meeting,
about.
at least a meeting, and introduce themselves and observe what's going on. And then if they're still interested, they would write to us, explain who they are and whatever.
And
and
come to another meeting.
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And I'm just listening to this, I'm thinking we should just, given that it's gonna be a rolling process.
Yeah.
So, as people, be nice to sort of get people on board in the fall, but we'll see how it
There's an
goes.
appointment calendar, but we don't have to go by that. I mean, people can,
Yeah, it already passed.
committee personnel is changing all the time through the year anyway. Not just our committee, but all committees.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, I could write it up.
I have
but
one
let's-
more question for Zoe.
Yeah,
And, I'm wondering if we were guilty of false advertising get your interest in the committee, Zoe? Did we, I was particularly interested in your viewpoint as from the agriculture point of view, as opposed to the science, electronics, or whatever. Did we misstate or somehow not state accurately what our involvement was with ag?
I don't feel like it really was a hot topic while I was on the committee. And that's okay. It's just the angle that I know most about. But I don't feel like there was I wasn't like expecting that necessarily. It did get pretty technical with all the places that we went to, and that was when I had a hard time like engaging on the level that I feel like could be helpful.
And that depended on what particular item of the charge we were working on at that point. So, yeah, which can change over time.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I always felt comfortable to, like, if I felt like there was a charge that I think that we should have been really focusing on and that we were missing out on, that you would all be open to hearing about that. I felt like my voice was encouraged. I just
Good.
didn't always know how to be helpful.
That's important. Thank you. Yeah.
And I think it's great questions and great answers, because I think this is a tough committee. I mean, one is brand new and it's so broad, and there's so
Yeah.
many different there's so many ways to approach this.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like we should be able to walk and talk and chew gum at the same time, but we also have to have, we still have to have enough people to do it, you know, and it takes the research and the coordination. So I think we got some live projects, but there's, you know, not everything pans out, although we've tried a couple of things. So I mean, year 2 will be interesting to see, because one would hope, and we'll talk about this in a sec, but like, you know, the CCA will get some legs. You know, and we don't want the committee only to be CCA, but we want to move that forward in a productive and efficient way. And so it's sort of like, how do we do other stuff at the same time? Yeah.
But that's another point I think to mention. It's not like every committee member has to be involved with every single project the committee's in. You know, because it's broad, because the charge is broad, you line up with a particular aspect of it. You're not required or expected to be full bore on every single thing that the committee undertakes.
Totally. I mean, and I will say, like, my original vision, like way back when I talked to Rita about thinking about this committee, was that it was really to try to serve as a catalyst to, for other committees to do stuff too. And we haven't quite got there, but, you know, even if we're full 7 people, it's still a huge task. So it's
That's a
sort of
lot.
like, how do you get other people to sort of incorporate the issue in the thinking, so they can just sort of take it and run with it, and we could be a resource or a nudge or something. So I think we haven't gotten there yet, but I think that's something I've had in the back of my mind, because, you know, there's a lot there. So I guess I'm happy to write this up unless.
Michael, can I
Yeah.
just throw something out there?
Sure.
And this is just a thought about this discussion I was thinking about, is that, you know, earlier this year, we had some discussion about having different people kind of act as liaisons to different boards.
Mhm.
And, you know, maybe we should be having a regular check-in about other boards, you know, from people who are liaising, just to kind of find out, you know, if those boards are interested, and, you know, what they're working on that might intersect with our charge. And then the other thought I had was that, you know, we had these working groups last December where we came up with a bunch of action steps, and
Mhm.
So we've been kind of working on a couple of them, but, you know, maybe making a point on our agenda to keep revisiting it, those
Uh-huh.
those lists and seeing, you know, what we can be moving forward on.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, the working groups for sure. I think the liaison thing's a little problematic only because there's only gonna be four of us and who's
Yeah.
connected to what. It's a very partial list of all the committees that are there.
Yeah.
So I still like the idea. Implementing it is sort of the challenge, I think. Like I'm not clear on how we do that. I mean, Nate volunteered to do school committee and I'm doing planning board, you're doing Concom, and Gail, I forget which, you're doing open space, I think. So, but there's other, you know, there's others, and I'm gonna try to follow up with AJ sometime this summer. He said that we could have a meeting with the FinCom and Select Board about funding climate stuff. So, you know, maybe we can sort of talk to the FinCom about that. But there's different opportunities, but I agree. I mean, I think, and we might just hear through the grapevine, like, you know, a committee is working on something, one of us might want to go. So it's a good point. Duly noted. I wrote it down. And I think we can just add it to as a future conversation. So just to wrap up the new member piece, I mean, I can write up a little blurb and share it with you guys, or I don't, Gail, sometimes you write it up and share it out. Does anyone have a strong opinion about who does the first draft?
Go for it.
Okay, I will do the first draft. Okie dokie, cool, great. So the next thing is possible projects with the Conway School. And this was something that Leslie connected with them about. And somewhere in the last month, the contact there, CJ Lammers, wrote to me, and she couldn't come tonight, but let's see what she told me. I just wanted to read it. Let's see. So they've got a winter term that's January to March. And if we wanted to do something with them, they would do pre-planning with us. And she gave me a couple examples of projects that they've already done. So in terms of climate resilience, they worked with Whately on a watershed scale climate resilience plan. And they worked with Plainfield on a climate resilience plan. It was in 2023 and 2022 respectively.
What was the
And-
other town? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Whately and Plainfield.
Okay.
And then they did for green infrastructure and stormwater, they did, I don't know how to say this word really, riparian, is that what it is?
Riparian.
Okay, repair and restoration for the Deerfield watershed, river watershed for Deerfield, I'm assuming. And then they did a Green Streets project for Chicopee. So we could have them do something if we could pitch it. And let's see, and she did say the issue that I went back and forth with Leslie on was, you know, there's both the ability of the town to pay for this, plus also the timing of the town to pay for it, both which seemed unlikely to work. But she said that Joe Comerford is looking at possible funding. I don't know what that means, being that the budget process is, like, if it's in a current budget process or whatever, and like, if that would just go to Conway School and they would subsidize it. Gail?
But this goes back to a point you've been making a long time, and that is to get the select board to give us a revolving fund amount of money, some level, that would enable us to take advantage of this kind of resource.
Yeah, I mean, if we had that, then we wouldn't have to worry. I mean, if Joe's getting money in the budget, say to the Conway School, to pick up the cost of it, so it doesn't cost the town.
And if this would feed into a grant possibility through green communities, even better, but
Yeah. I mean, my sense is, I don't feel like we're ready, like we don't have something that's project, there's students who want to learn, who are ready to dig in, and it feels responsible to sort of have a little bit more clarity and ongoing conversations. So, I mean, I talked to CJ when I was on the select board and we were looking at a project for lot 032, not the one that ended up happening, for a site analysis, but there was something else. I can't remember what it was, but so I think unless she's moving on, she's the contact, so we can reach out, in a few months if something pops up and says, get us in the queue. So unless someone has an idea currently that you want to pitch, I don't have one. Gail, I love that you're raising your hand.
Are they willing to tell you what the projects were at Plainfield and Whately? I mean.
Oh
might
yeah,
you
she
have some
gave me the links.
Ideas or contours of what kind of projects might be forthcoming because of the work they've already done?
Yeah, well, she sent me the links and it looks like it's a whole report. So Whately is this watershed scale climate resilient plan, which is a 148-page report.
It seems to me like there's just going to be a whole lot of preparatory work. Even just setting up.
Is the watershed plan, it isn't a watershed based plan that this is it? Because that's a whole thing.
Well, these are students, doing landscape architecture, so I don't think they're digging in on, but I don't know. It says Waterwise Whately, a watershed scale climate resilience plan.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'll send you guid the link. I should have
Yeah,
done that.
I'd love to look at it.
So I mean, I think they do good work.
If I talked to you guys about the Lake Wyola watershed based plan and the feedback from the FERCog meeting, did anybody, I was at the last meeting so I don't know if anyone talked about that with you guys.
We didn't have a conversation here, but let's not do it right this second.
All right.
'Cause it'll go down a path.
Okay.
I just want to figure out, so does anyone have any burning ideas, or should we just say thank you and we'll be in touch when we get something together? Does that feel okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And could you give us the URLs for the studies or the,
Yeah, I'll send you the email she sent me. And sorry for the oversight. I think that it
so if
would
we
be
have or
helpful.
take time, we could go look
And
at. some of they've already
Wasn't
done.
it sounded like there was an email that we got that suggested it was quite expensive, some of the,
Yeah,
what they,
12K was what was in Leslie's.
Yeah, I mean, that was the original thing, was like, Leslie was saying we can get the money, and had said we need a plan for getting the money because the town's not going to pay. So the only thing that makes this more viable is the fact that, there's a chance that Joe is getting money in the state budget, but it's unclear if that's coming through, when it would come through, who would get it, all that kind of stuff. So I think it'd be nice to have someone else to pay for it if we had a plan, and we had money that the town agreed to support it. We could do that. But there's right now, we'd have to pay for it unless we were part of this thing. So the next thing we're going to talk about is just next steps for CCA. So I'm trying to think. This is our first meeting since town meeting. So
Yeah.
Nate, did you have fun with that one?
I was too nervous to have fun, but I was happy with the end result.
Yeah,
The unanimous support was pretty good. And
I was really, I was just waiting for a question. Never came.
that's because you were so prepared and you did such a good job.
it also speaks to the handling of the forum, which was well attended and had lots of good questions and got good responses.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
we know what they're talking about.
yeah, we sort of got ahead of it, which is great. So I think that, the next steps, if I'm recalling correctly, is practically speaking, we need to move this forward. I think we need to sort of talk to the select board, and like Rita's been on vacation for at least, I think about a week or so, maybe more, and they were sort of recovering from town meetings. So I was thinking, depending on people's schedules, maybe in July, we can get on their agenda and say, okay, the town agreed to sort of move forward. Let's review the next steps. Nate had volunteered, to continue sort of being the point person for our committee, which we should just agree. It seems like, Gail, you're in support of that concept.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Miriam, you okay with it?
Okay, absolutely. Now just so I understand, has anything changed at the state level with the DPU and the whole municipal power plant thing?
No.
We're
No.
that's still the sticking point right now. Because wasn't Donna McNichol going to talk to them? That never happened.
It didn't happen, but she did have conversations with other people, and her advice was move forward, and sort of the other town, we know other towns who have been in our situation. So just continue to move forward and then see what happens. So somewhere in there, we have to talk to the DPU, but it was more of the, what's the expression? Ask for forgiveness after the
Right.
fact kind of thing.
Right.
So if your lawyer says that, that's. and
Does that
that's-
mean we can go ahead and nail an agent, or what do you call it?
Well, I think that's part of the conversation. I think, if we're good with Nate representing us, then I think probably Nate and I would go to a select board meeting, and you guys are welcome. If I'll just post it if you want to come, but have a conversation with them and say, this is how we understand the
Here's
next
what we want to
steps.
do, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, Nate, it is sort of reaching out to an agent, right? Is that the next step? A broker?
That's right. It, in the warrant language, the article language, it's the select board or its designee goes and
Yeah, I think you'll
It's
be
a broker.
designated.
That's you, buddy.
gets. Well, the select board part is, yeah, I think that is probably the next step is that joining one of their meetings. I know that we've talked a little bit about what the landscape is in terms of brokers that are doing this kind of work, and it really does seem as though there really maybe one choice or a couple of choices for potential brokers. But I've been in dialogue with Colonial just to get information about different nuances of developing a plan, and I know that they'll be available to present whenever it seems appropriate for them to kind of pitch their services. Well, so
And they're a broker.
Colonial, yes, yeah. So the towns, what I was speaking with folks from nearby towns, they were all using Colonial and
Oh, really?
had a good experience with their work. So
Yeah. And you told me at town meeting that you got the sense that it was all turf. They're divided up by region, so people didn't go into other people's turf.
I mean, you could infer that. If you look at a map, it sure has there's spatial clustering. Amherst, Pelham, and Northampton, they're developing a totally different kind of thing. That's the analog is Cape Light Compact, which was the first
Okay. Mhm,
group of communities getting together and
mhm.
creating their own legal entity that is empowered to go out and get bids. So
The three towns are doing that together, or each of them are doing that?
they're
It's
doing
collective.
it together. Yeah.
It's
So
collective.
Amherst, Pelham, and Northampton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the idea is, Nate, correct me if we're wrong, but they're sort of serving as their own broker in the sense that the broker takes a small percentage, and that's their profit. And the Amherst, Northampton, Pelham construct is the money that they would otherwise charge the towns keep and then can deploy for other climate related projects. So
Uh-huh.
they're building a reservoir, which is when we first talked about this like a year ago, they weren't as far along. And I think we had mentioned them, but it was sort of, we want to get this going and we sort of can't wait for them to get their act together. But at this
Right.
point, they've come along. So did I get that right, Nate, in terms of a shorthand description?
Yeah, you know, but that fee is also covering like staff, like they're, you know, it's an effort and an enterprise
For the big one.
to manage, right, to stand up and manage. So I don't think the calculus has changed for Shutesbury at this moment, but you can conceive of, you know, years down the line where, you know, maybe maybe we could join that in the same way as communities join Cape Light Compact.
That's what I wanted to ask, if it's possible or plausible for us to consider, or would they accept other communities joining with them in this?
So I think down the road that is part of their vision. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And in working with if we were, you know, working with a broker at the beginning, we are going down a path of, you know, an annual contract, like a contract that lasts 1 year, you know, maybe 2 years.
Yeah.
So there'd be a cadence to that we could, you know, build into the review of how things are going.
Right.
Is this a time to look elsewhere, or how's it going? Like, you know, those kinds of things.
And would they have, as a group, have a definition of who might join with them? What stage along the way, or what needs would fit with them?
I'm trying to remember the name of the person I spoke with.
Darcy.
but yes, yeah, it was Darcy. That was one of my first questions. Like, does it make sense for Shutesbury to throw in its lot with this?
Even to be looking at that down the road, yeah.
And yeah, the way she had described it at the time was that enlargement was part of the potential for other communities joining as part of the vision. But I did not have a sense of like what that process would look like.
Right.
But yeah, I think
They may not have either.
maybe not. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Should
it'll
we,
be part of their governance, you know.
should we inquire about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's part of our due diligence. We should check in with them for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know from talking to her, I don't know, a long time ago, that, you know, they were imagining multiple towns being part of this. So it's really sort of a phasing thing of them getting their legs underneath them and then figuring out how to bring other people in. You know, and then I think to Nate's point, like if we went down the road of a broker, we'd get our feet wet and figuring out, you know, people get acclimated to what this
Right.
looks and feels like. So shifting from a broker to the Amherst, Pelham, Northampton thing might not be as big a leap if we decided to do that. So
The landscape, as you say.
Yeah, and real quick, so they've gotten to the point of standing up the entity that will develop that they're developing plans at this point, right? So in a way, we're not that far behind them, because they're at the stage of each of the towns is developing their aggregation plan, which then is going to go to DPU, right, for review. And the path that we have been talking about so far is we get a broker, and then the broker develops that plan, and then it goes to DPU, you know, after public comment and, you know, a few other steps. So I think they're at the point of soliciting public comment on their plans. So I can send out like sort of a set of consolidated links on like where they're at stage wise, and we can also check in with Darcy as well.
yeah,
Just let her know that we've made some progress on our end too.
Yeah, so from a concrete perspective, it seems like the next steps would be, I reach out to Rita and try to get on the select board agenda, and then we can just have a conversation. I'm assuming that they would just designate Nate to be the
Go for
the
it.
designee, and then in all likelihood, when there's decisions and recommendations to be made, that, you know, we as ECAC can sort of discuss it, and then, you know, either Nate can just sort of communicate that to Becky or to the select board if there's a decision, you know, and at some point, whenever the submission needs to happen, but we can sort of figure out what's the work plan that needs to happen, who's, you know, who's doing what, when, and, you know, support Nate in the thinking process and maybe the doing process if need be. Gail?
My guess is that ECAC would be the designee. And that Nate would be the spokesperson for the ECAC. I don't think they're going to give a single
Right.
person the designation, but a
don't
town
know.
committee would certainly make sense.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, because he's an appointed member, so it's not like he's not connected to anything. I mean, if we're recommending that he be
Well,
the designee for us,
that's their thing. Yeah, I just,
yeah. So, but the most important thing is that Nate's interested.
Yeah, great.
So, yeah.
Thank
And,
you.
yeah, so we will begin our next step in this long voyage.
woohoo.
Yeah, which is very cool. So the only
And
other,
thank you, Michael, for persevering and getting it on the warrant, despite any of the discouraging and outright negative
yeah,
thoughts there on too.
yeah,
For sure.
you're welcome. I was surprised it happened, but I'm really glad it did.
Yeah.
So we were going to talk just about checking about wetland regulations, and then I think updates and then minutes. So Mary, I mean, we did have a conversation. I don't know if there's 2 meetings ago, maybe about wetland regulations, but do you want to just sort of introduce what you wanted to update everybody about?
Well, the Conservation Commission is looking for public comment from town boards. So ECAC deals with the environment and climate change and climate resilience and stormwater issues. And so we'd really like to hear from ECAC as well as other boards. So
Did anyone get it? Because you sent them out to everybody a few weeks ago, so I don't know if anyone got to read them. It's a long document.
68 pages.
Yeah, I read them and then went to, I forget what meeting it was where Miriam presented it, but and I've shared some of my thoughts, but did you guys get a chance to read it or have thoughts generally speaking about what you might want to see?
The language was so legalese and so. I think if I would have made a suggestion, it would be that the Concom write a summary in layman's language. To make it easier to understand and certainly to make it less than 68 pages. It's just daunting. The language and the length is just daunting.
there is a PDF. There are a couple of, have you gone to, we have a website and we
Right.
did, a PDF with a PowerPoint summary of some of the issues that might be illuminating. And I think we would have cheat sheets. And one of the things that we wanted people to understand is that the regulations in a lot of ways are like the reference. It's kind of like the encyclopedia that we would go to for making decisions, but it wouldn't be the go-to place for the members of
Right.
the.
And I guess I'm appealing for a go-to place that makes sense for a lay reader.
Yes.
The
so-
issues are so technical and who knows who cares about these little bitty things. You know, when we're talking about a broad brushstroke, I guess is what I'm asking.
So when we adopt the regulations, we certainly will have like layman's terms, like how to do it checklists for people who are going through applications. So they wouldn't have to go to the regulations to figure out how to do something. We already have a lot of those kinds of instructions already on our website and we would update them.
Right.
If you feel that from people to understand the regulations, we could make a cheat sheet, maybe that would be a summary of what we're doing. The reason why the language is technical is because it's, for the most part, it mirrors the kind of language that's in the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, but it expands on those regulations because
I
those-
understand that, but I guess I'm asking for a translation into layman's language
okay.
and in a summarized form.
Yeah. Nate or Zoe, did you have anything you wanted to share? If you read them, and if you didn't, you can make it up.
Pretend you ask.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want to make anything up, but I am underprepared for like substantive feedback right
okay,
now. Yeah,
okay.
Well,
But the thing,
regretfully.
Let me, maybe this would be helpful if I pose some questions. Because I don't think, I think it could be daunting if you're not familiar with wetland regulations to say, well, I don't know, are these good regulations or not good regulations? But there are some pieces of this that I think are sort of relevant for ECAC. And I guess, if ECAC has support for those things, that would be helpful for the commission to hear. We are including some provisions and some standards for stormwater management that would give us some standards by which to review projects to make sure that each project that gets permitted is sort of dealing with its own stormwater within the property boundaries of a given property, and that there isn't kind of unintended consequences of stormwater runoff from one project area running off and influencing other properties or wetland resource areas. So that there's some detailed language in there about that.
That would be very helpful. And then we would see the marriage of the ECAC charges and the provisions in the regulations.
Yeah. So you can look at, there's a section called stormwater management, and you might direct you to look at that. And then there's also a piece of it around, I believe I think it's called a no net loss policy or standard. So what that has to do with is, again, that if a property increases the amount of impervious surface on the property, let's say somebody puts in a large paved parking lot, for example, that they have to figure out where that water is going to go.
Mhm.
And currently under state regs, if it's a smallish project, only really large projects end up kind of being held to a stormwater management standard. But many communities are adopting these standards for smaller projects, and we've scaled it down. So we're not requiring the same standards for a Walmart parking lot for somebody paving their parking area on their home, right? We're scaling the requirements down so that they're proportional to the project.
Mhm.
And the expense of the project. A large commercial project would be different from somebody doing something for their home,
Right.
residential property. But we are saying that for those small projects, people still have to figure out and explain to us, what are they doing with
Where
stormwater?
water's going to go. Yeah. And how.
Right. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we're going to require them to hire a structural water resource engineer necessarily or any of that, but they have to explain it and come across, present a plan to us. So that you can look at those things, and those would be the two sections to look at if you want to understand more about that. For ECAC, I think the other issues is that we know that wetlands sequester carbon, and buffer zones to wetlands also sequester a great deal of carbon. And the ability of wetlands to sequester carbon requires a vegetated buffer zone. That, wetland health depends on buffer zones being vegetated. And so it's really also kind of a mechanism for carbon sequestration. And that's kind of where we're at. That's where
And if that kind of a statement were in the regulations, it would be very helpful, I think.
I'm pretty sure I just quoted it verbatim, Gail, but
Okay.
I can look. I'm sure we have a whole section, a preamble about the buffer zone where we talk about carbon
Okay,
sequestration, but I will go back and look at it.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in, I mean, Gail, I had the same sort of comments that you did, that it felt even, it was hard to follow, even though I like this kind of stuff, but I'm not as well versed in wetland stuff as I am in like other things. So it's a little dense, and and Miriam sort of explained to me sort of why it's structured the way it's structured. So, but I think the Concom didn't get feedback to make it a little bit shorter. And I think what Miriam told me, which is helpful, is if the part of the conversation with the public is that there's this instruction, how-tos, like if you want to do something, that it seems like that's the educational component, so one, it's easy to access, and two, like you were just saying, Gail, that like if those instructions things say this is why we're doing it, it feels less regulatory, like with the stick, and more like actually stormwater going off your property makes a difference, and we need to understand what's going on, or that Shutesbury cares about carbon sequestration, and
Yeah,
therefore
so what
those
I-
things.
What I'd like to encourage people to look at when you read it is that when we go through the different parts of different kinds of wetlands, there's a preamble for each section. And the preamble is the why is it important?
Yeah.
And so that is, and the reason why it's textbookish is because that we can lift that language out and put them in the findings of permits
and apply it, right.
and apply it, and then it's
Yeah.
defensible in court because
Get
it was
that.
regulations.
I
If
get
we
that.
don't have it in the regulations and we just add it to a permit, it will not be as strong as if we adopt it as regulations and then say, and look, we're basing our decision on this preamble language that says, that the buffer zone is critical for climate resilience, or, whatever, rare species protection, or, all the different things that we talk about. Yeah, I think that, the important thing.
Can I add one more thing? Just
Yeah, go ahead.
my thought. So this is a new thought that I've had just because of this conversation, but I think that one thing that would help with accessibility is actually formatting, so like if it was formatted a little bit more creatively, so like the preamble popped because that's what people were going to go to, and it was not all in the same font and not all the same size, but visually it was more accessible. When people looked at it, you would gravitate to the preamble and maybe sort of experience the fine print more as fine print. So if you skimmed, you would get to the why this is important stuff and maybe skim over some of the other things if it's not relevant, but the words would stay the same.
So I think what based on the feedback I got from the planning board meeting, I think what we're going to probably create, Michael, is kind of an executive summary, sort of cheat sheet intro document. if
In
you
the
will.
document or separate?
It doesn't matter, in the document or attached, not in the document, but attached online.
It
So
could head the
that-
document.
What?
It could head the document.
It could
Yeah.
have a document, whatever, that is certainly something we can do. That would be sort of the place for people to go. And that could be used, in layman's terms.
Yep.
And would make it clear that, there's going to be instruction sheets for things so that people don't start getting confused, trying to figure it out without realizing that they can go somewhere else for how to apply that kind of stuff. So, and we can talk about maybe, an explanation about what a preamble is and things like that, and why it's structured the way it is.
Your
You know-
consultant loud as how you could cut it by a third, which would be helpful.
He said he'd like to see it, but then when we talked with him, we said, well, what would you recommend cutting? And he said,
And
well,
cutting gets to be hard. It gets to be uncondensing. But part of my concern, I was on the Concom for many years. And I was faced with this language. I don't consider myself a naive reader. And it was like,
Oh.
way, which is why I'm making the plea for more layman's language instead of legalese. So I believe at that point, never mind.
Nate?
Well, if you wanna, go through it, and even Gail, if you were interested in giving me some feedback about language that wasn't clear, I can give you a Word version of it. So you can mark it up if you want. I mean, I would love to get that kind of feedback from people at a more granular level, if anybody's willing to do that.
Zoe?
Is this document also for like homeowners who are considering a project and wanting to educate themselves about how to do it
Yep.
while abiding? It's a functional document for that purpose also.
It wouldn't be a standalone. There would be instructions for applicants, and there already are, Zoe. If you go on our website, we have instructions for different kinds of permits for applicants, and it's a checklist like you do this, do this, do this. So this would be a reference that people could refer to, but they wouldn't be required to in order to know how to apply.
And I wonder also if there's an option on the website for if somebody like wanted to work with a conservation commission consultant to like talk to a human and ask specific questions about what they can and can't do and why.
Yeah, we have a section in the regulations called working sessions policy, which is basically saying that people can reach out to us to consult and get feedback prior to the application phase. And, you know, we have a lot of language already on the website saying, if you have any questions, please contact us, reach out to us. So, you know, we try to do that. We do that at the our town newsletter once a year. We put some little blurb in encouraging landowners to reach out to us, and
That's great.
we don't want to, what we debated, we don't want to have too much specifics around if you have this kind of project, then you need to do this kind of permit, because every project is so individual and unique. It's hard to capture it and then not get tripped up with an exception to that rule. So would rather kind of take it a case by case basis, to have people have dialogues with us. And, you know, that's really where we want to be, is we want to be interacting with people and having them come to us for a dialogue.
Yeah, and using the regulations as kind of a scaffolding to discuss the issues with them. But
I've had experiences with permitting, and I'm sure, Gail, you've had this as well, where people are kind of like, why do I have to do that? Or I don't like this permit condition you added. Why do I have to have a vegetated buffer strip along the shoreline at Lake Wyola? I'm angry that I had to have this. And having a regulation that talks about mitigation gives us some place to point to as an explanation when people ask us questions like that, because right now there is nothing in the regulations that explains any of that. And so it gives people the impression sometimes, I think, that we're just making stuff up on the fly. We're just pulling it out of a hat, like, you know, bam, that's a rule and you're in your permit. But if we spell it all out ahead of time, in some ways that we have to be held to that. That's also constraining for us, because now we put our values and our policies in writing, and then that would be our go-to justification for what we do. And if we can't justify it, then we shouldn't require it. Right? We shouldn't be layering on more requirements if we haven't been able to articulate the rationale for why they're important.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the big opportunity here, is that you have to have the regulations to point to for legal reasons, but the interface, if you think about the interface with the public, is that it should be that this document, not the checklist, but this document, if and when people go there, should have some, it's the preamble part. It's like, you know, it's values forward. You know, it's like people see that it's an educational opportunity to see, you know, why it's getting done, and then the specifics within it, as opposed to just punitive regulations, you know. So I think the vibe, people would respond to it differently if they see it as educational, without changing the words. I think it's just like how to figure out how to make it a little bit more friendly and informative feeling, even if the words are the same. So that, I don't know how to do that. Gail?
The way we did the open space and recreation plan was to have what we called an executive summary at the beginning of each section. Not a different font or anything for visuals, but this was the big chunk, like number 1A for that section that explained exactly what you just put out there, Michael. And then the rest were the specifics of how that follows. But that executive summary was the pith of what this whole section was about and why. And I would suggest that might be a good format. for
Yeah,
this.
I think it would be, I mean, I definitely think we could do that for some of them. I think for some sections, there's certain sections of the regulations that are kind of very heterogeneous. You know, it's like there's a whole bunch of things and each thing is a little different. It's not whereas, you know, definitions, they're all definitions, they're all a type of.
Right, that's straightforward, okay.
Right, and performance standards for resource areas, that's a whole bunch of scientific standards for different kinds of
Okay.
wetlands. But then there's these other more heterogeneous categories. So I'm thinking maybe an executive summary at the beginning of the whole document, a kind of an intro to it, an explanation what each portion of the regulations covers, so that people can, when they look at the table of contents, they know where to go.
Nowhere to go, yeah.
And also that they should go to our website or contact us because that's where the explanations will be offered. There's a big part of what we do is educational all the time. So this document is not supposed to be the only educational resource. We go out and do site visits, and we are educating people during site visits and in meetings and during hearings. And so people call us and we respond to phone calls and talk to people all the time. So this is not a substitute for that.
Cool.
That's very important work, and we do that.
So when's the hearing, Miriam? It's July, right?
July 12th.
Okay. So I think if we can leave it at that, I think we only got a couple other things to
Sure.
do, if that
I'll
works.
just, in closing, say, if any of you individually want to write comments, you're welcome to do that.
Cool.
And it would be helpful. You know, we haven't received a single written comment yet, and it's been a month since we released these regulations. So it would be really nice to get some written feedback from people.
Cool. And we just sent it to the Concom email address, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Want you to feel some love.
Thanks. That is good.
So I realized it's like maybe a couple of quick updates before we do minutes, because I was looking at the minutes and it said that Gail, you were going to look into finding out about if there was any issues about us supporting particular legislation. I don't know if you got a chance to do that or not to put you on the spot, but
I had second thoughts on that because it is clear from our language, it has to do more with questions to legal counsel rather than checking in with other towns. So my question to you, or maybe to the select board, is what kind of access we have to legal counsel?
that's a challenging one. I mean, I do know, as Miriam knows, that there's a downward pressure on
Yeah.
access
not
to
to
data, just all for financial reasons mostly. And it will.
Yeah,
only-
because her time has money, yeah. So it might be that we simply go ahead and sign petitions. And if somebody wants to argue what you said before, better to ask permission after the fact.
Right, the
Forgiveness.
forgiveness.
Yeah,
Right.
is the worry that it's a deliberation, that it's an open meeting law violation because you're communicating at a position to the rest of the committee? Is that the concern?
I think
Then we
it's-
can bring it to a committee vote. Would you support signing this petition to Governor Healy on blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I think it's mostly sort of like, my sense is how accountable, how is that relationship since we're a town committee? You know, like, are we speaking for the town? And I think, I mean, it's a lot, my
But
sense
that's
is,
part of the charge. That's,
Right.
that's the whole
Yeah.
pitch.
and I think as long as we identify us as a committee of the town as opposed to the town, then, you know, that's sufficient.
Most of these petitions have a chance to say, are you signing as an individual or as an organization? And
Right,
at that point, we can say it's for the Shutesbury Committee on Energy and Climate Action.
right. Yeah, that I think is, you know, we are ourselves.
Yep.
So, and it is part of the charge. So I think that's reasonable. So, cool. Any other, I did my update, which is that I talked to AJ at town meeting and he knew exactly what I was approaching him for and said after town meeting, we should figure out a time. So I'm giving him June before I pester him to come up with a time, but I did.
Michael, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I was gonna follow with Rita as well. Because I think it's a 3-committee conversation.
Michael, have we heard anything about where things stand with the MVP applications? What happened with all that?
I don't know. I don't know the status. I know that, you know, there was this MVP 2 that I didn't think we could apply for because it was just another round of stuff. But I don't know, the current one we applied for, I haven't heard back. I'm not sure what the decision-making time is. But I'm hoping Becky will let us know when she hears because she's the contact. I think I feel like it's a little too soon right now. But I don't,
Because in May was the deadline.
something like that, yeah. So, you know, state wheels of decision-making are slow. So, but I also think, you know, there's my read on just sort of where Healy's administration is, there probably be some additional opportunities, you know, that might come up. And so just tracking those and being able to figure out what we can do. And there might be some interesting conversations the next year about new grant opportunities as they gear up.
And there was something I had forwarded to all of you. And to the town. I'm forgetting what it was, but it was an opportunity to be part of to sign up for it had to do with stormwater, didn't it?
Yeah, stormwater financing.
Right.
Right. So I don't know if anybody it's probably too late because the deadline was this week, so.
Let's see, I'm just looking at, it was the workshop series, right?
There's a workshop series you could sign up for.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I know I am not doing it because my cup is way full. But I appreciate you passing it along because I think people will bite if they know about it. Any other updates? So I think the only other piece of business besides setting our next meeting date is approving the minutes. So does someone want to move to consider approving the minutes for May 16th, 2023?
So moved.
The second?
I'll second.
Okay, and these are the minutes that Graham sent out earlier that were revised. I'm not sure what the updated visions were, but any comments on them, or they look good to people?
They were fine.
Okay, well, why don't I do the roll call? So Nate, do you approve it?
Approved.
Miriam?
I abstain, I wasn't there.
Okay, Zoe,
Proof.
Gail,
Proof.
and I approve. So 4-0 with 1 abstention.
I'll
Cool.
convert those to a PDF and send them on to Grace.
Great, that'd be terrific. So I think the last order of business officially is figuring out what our next meeting should be. And let's see. I think we could do today is the 27th, so the 18th might make sense. If
That's-
people,
That's 3 weeks.
yeah, or we could do the 25th, either way. I guess the 25th would give us more time in between. People have any preferences? Oh, no one's going away for vacation or anything on those 2 weeks. Okay, why don't we do the 25th?
Sold.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say is, Zoe, it's been a pleasure. We loved having you on the committee. Come back whenever you'd like to visit. And have fun with the cheese making workshop.
Thank you. It really has been heartening to be on this committee. And getting to know you all a bit better, and knowing that this is all happening, even if I'm not here every week or every month to witness it, is really nice.
Cool.
I
That's
would
good.
echo Michael's, and I have learned so much from you and from the perspective that you bring. It's been very valuable to my sight of the whole town, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe.
Okie dokie. Have a wonderful rest of the night. See you guys in a month if not before. Oh, yeah, that's right. You want to so move there, Miriam?
Yeah.
Who wants a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Nate,
Aye.
Gail,
Aye.
Miriam,
Hi.
I'm an aye. Zoe, you get the last aye.
Aye.
Okay, cool. See you guys.
Good night, all.
Right.